The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 3 years. Maya rolled over and hit the snooze button with more force than necessary. 5 more minutes. That's all she needed before facing another 18-hour day. Her small apartment was quiet except for the gentle hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen. Through the paper-thin walls, she could hear her neighbor's baby crying. Maya smiled despite her exhaustion. At least someone in this building got to sleep in past sunrise. She stumbled to the bathroom and looked at herself in the cracked mirror. Dark circles under her brown eyes told the story of too many late nights and early mornings. Her black hair was a mess, but a quick ponytail would fix that. She had learned long ago that looking perfect wasn't part of her job description. The coffee maker gurgled to life as Maya pulled on her work uniform. Black pants, white shirt, comfortable shoes that had seen better days. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would draw attention. That was the key to surviving in her line of work. Stay invisible. Do your job. Don't make waves. Her phone buzzed with a text from her younger brother. Good luck today. Remember, you're stronger than you think. Maya's heart warmed. Even from his hospital bed, he was still trying to take care of her. She quickly typed back a heart emoji and headed out the door. The morning bus ride to downtown took 45 minutes. Maya used this time to close her eyes and prepare for the day ahead. She worked at one of the city's most expensive restaurants, the kind of place where a single meal cost more than most people made in a week. The Golden Terrace was known for its perfect service, incredible food, and wealthy clientele. Maya had been working there for 2 years now. She started as a kitchen helper, washing dishes and preparing vegetables. But she was smart, hardworking, and never complained. When a waitress position opened up, the manager offered it to her. The tips were better, but the job was much harder. The restaurant sat on the top floor of a glass building, offering stunning views of the city. During the day, business people made deals over expensive lunches. At night, the wealthy came to see and be seen. Maya had served movie stars, politicians, and tech millionaires. To them, she was just part of the furniture. She arrived at work 30 minutes early, just like always. The morning shift was quieter, mostly coffee and light breakfast for early business meetings. Maya preferred these hours. The customers were usually in a hurry and didn't have time to be difficult. Maya, you're on the private dining room tonight, her supervisor told her during the afternoon break. Big party. Some tech guy celebrating a business deal. They specifically requested our best servers. Maya nodded. Private parties meant better tips, but they also meant dealing with people who thought their money gave them the right to treat staff however they wanted. She had served enough of these events to know what to expect. The afternoon flew by in a blur of lunch orders and coffee refills. By evening, Maya had changed into the restaurant's special event uniform. Black dress, white apron, polished shoes. She looked professional, competent, and most importantly, forgettable. The private dining room was the restaurant's crown jewel. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city lights. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over mahogany tables set with the finest china. In the corner sat a beautiful grand piano, rarely used except for special occasions. Maya had always loved that piano. During quiet moments when no one was looking, she would run her fingers along its polished surface. She remembered the first time she saw it, how her heart had skipped a beat. It reminded her of the piano in her childhood home, the one she had spent countless hours playing before everything changed. The guests began arriving at 7 o'clock. Maya recognized the type immediately. Expensive suits, designer dresses, watches that cost more than she made in a year. They spoke in loud voices about stock prices and business deals, laughing at jokes that weren't funny but came from the right people. The host was a man in his mid-40s with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He owned several tech companies and was known for his ruthless business tactics. Tonight he was celebrating buying out his biggest competitor. The champagne flowed freely, and the guests' voices grew louder with each glass. Maya moved between the tables like a ghost, refilling drinks and clearing plates. She had perfected the art of being present but invisible. Smile when spoken to, nod at the right moments, never interrupt the conversation. It was a delicate dance she had learned through years of practice. As the evening progressed, she noticed the host watching her. There was something in his eyes that made her uncomfortable. She had seen that look before, usually right before someone decided to make the staff part of their entertainment. The dining room was full of laughter and conversation. Business cards were exchanged, deals were discussed, and connections were made. Maya continued her work, hoping to get through the evening without incident. But she could feel the host's eyes following her movements, and her stomach began to twist with worry. The grand piano sat silent in the corner, its black surface reflecting the chandelier light. Maya glanced at it as she passed, remembering the music that used to fill her life. Those days felt like a lifetime ago, back when she believed anything was possible. Now, her world was much smaller. Work, hospital visits, sleep, repeat. Every day was a struggle to keep her head above water, to pay the bills and take care of her brother. Dreams were luxuries she couldn't afford. The guests were getting louder and more demanding. They snapped, their fingers for service, spoke over her when she tried to take their orders, and treated her like she was invisible unless they needed something. Maya was used to it, but tonight felt different. There was an energy in the room that made her nervous. She caught her reflection in the window as she served another round of drinks. The city lights twinkled behind her like stars, beautiful and distant. For just a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a different life. One where she was sitting at those tables instead of serving them. One where her talents were recognized and valued. But reality quickly pulled her back. She had responsibilities, people counting on her. Her brother needed her, and that was all that mattered. She could survive anything as long as she remembered why she was doing it. The host raised his glass for a toast, and the room fell silent. Maya stepped back against the wall, trying to blend into the shadows. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. As the evening wore on, Maya continued her work with quiet determination. She didn't know that in just a few hours her carefully constructed invisible world would be shattered. She didn't know that the very thing she was trying to hide would soon be exposed to a room full of strangers. All she knew was that she needed to get through another night, earn another day's pay, and keep moving forward. The piano waited in the corner, silent and patient, holding secrets that would soon be revealed. The champagne had been flowing for over 2 hours, and Maya could see the effects on the guests. Their voices were louder, their laughter more forced, and their demands more unreasonable. She had refilled the host's glass at least 6 times, watching as his polite facade slowly melted away with each drink. He was telling a story about crushing a small startup company, describing it like it was a game rather than people's livelihoods. His guests hung on every word, laughing at the right moments and nodding in agreement. Maya tried not to listen as she cleared empty plates, but his voice carried across the room. The best part, he said, swirling his champagne, was watching their faces when they realized they had nothing left. Absolutely priceless. Maya's stomach turned. She thought about her own struggles, how one bad month could destroy everything she had worked for, but she kept her expression neutral and continued her work. Getting emotional about customers was a luxury she couldn't afford. As she reached for an empty glass near the piano, she accidentally hummed a few notes under her breath. It was something she did without thinking, a habit from her childhood when music filled every quiet moment of her life. The melody was soft and barely audible, but somehow the host heard it. Well, he said, turning toward her with a grin that made Maya's blood run cold. Our little waitress has a voice. The conversation around the table stopped. All eyes turned to Maya, who felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had broken the first rule of service work. Never draw attention to yourself. I'm sorry, sir, she said quietly, trying to step away from the piano. I didn't mean to disturb you. But the host wasn't done with her. The alcohol had made him bold, and he was enjoying the power he held over the situation. No, don't. Apologize, I think we'd all love to hear more. He stood up, swaying slightly, and addressed his guests. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems our entertainment for the evening has been right here all along. Maya felt panic rising in her chest. She could see where this was heading, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The other guests were smiling, now excited by the prospect of a show at someone else's expense. I really should get back to work, Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. Can I get anyone another drink? The host laughed, a sound without warmth. Work? Sweetheart, this is work, customer service, right? And right now, I'm requesting a service. He gestured toward the piano with theatrical flair. Play us something. I'm sure a girl like you knows a tune or two. Maybe something you learned in school. His tone was dripping with condescension. Maya could hear the assumptions in his voice, the belief that someone in her position couldn't possibly have any real talent or education. To him, she was just part of the scenery, existing solely for his amusement. I don't really play, Maya lied, hoping to end this before it got worse. I was just humming while I worked. But her denial only seemed to encourage him. Oh, come on, don't be modest. I bet you've got some real talent hidden away. The other guests were getting involved now, egging him on. A woman in a diamond necklace clapped her hands together. This could be fun, like a talent show. An older man in an expensive suit chuckled. I haven't seen dinner theater in years. Maya realized they saw this as entertainment, an amusing diversion from their wealthy lives. She wasn't a person to them. She was a curiosity, something to laugh at and then forget. The humiliation of it made her hands shake. Please, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to continue serving. The kitchen is waiting for me to clear these dishes. The host's expression darkened. He wasn't used to being refused, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. The alcohol had stripped away any pretense of politeness. Listen, honey, he said, his voice taking on a harder edge. I'm paying for this room, this food, and your service. When I ask for something, I expect to get it. He pulled out his wallet and threw a $100 bill on the table. There. Consider it a tip in advance. Now get over to that piano and play us something nice. Maya stared at the money, feeling sick. She thought about her brother's medical bills, about the rent that was due next week, about all the reasons she needed this job. But she also thought about her dignity, about the person she used to be before life forced her into survival mode. I really can't, she said, trying one more time to escape the situation. I'm not good enough to play for people like you. The host's smile turned cruel. People like us? And what kind of people are we exactly? It was a trap, and Maya knew it. Anything she said would be turned against her. If she complimented them, she would be mocking them. If she said nothing, she would be seen as rude. There was no right answer. Important people, she said finally, hoping to appeal to his ego. People who deserve better than whatever I could play. But her strategy backfired. The host laughed loudly, turning to his guests. Did you hear that? She thinks we're too good for her little songs. He turned back to Maya, his eyes gleaming with malicious pleasure. Well, I disagree. I think we're exactly the right audience for whatever you've got. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in. Maya could feel the weight of everyone's stare, could hear the whispered comments and barely suppressed laughter. She was trapped, caught between her need for this job and her desire to maintain what little dignity she had left. I'll double the tip, the host said, throwing another bill on the table. $200 just to play one song. That's probably more than you make in a week, right? His guests murmured appreciation for his generosity, but Maya could hear the mockery underneath. They were buying a show, purchasing the right to laugh at her expense. The money might as well have been 30 pieces of silver. She looked around the room, searching for an ally, for someone who might intervene. But every face showed the same expression, excited anticipation mixed with casual cruelty. They were all complicit in this moment, all enjoying the power they held over her. The grand piano sat waiting, its keys gleaming under the chandelier light. Maya had avoided looking at it directly, but now she couldn't escape its presence. It called to her, representing both her greatest fear and her deepest longing. What's it going to be? The host asked, his voice cutting through her thoughts. Are you going to take the money and give us a little show? Or do I need to have a conversation with your manager about your attitude? The threat was clear. Refuse, and lose her job. Comply, and lose her self-respect. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about her brother lying in his hospital bed, trusting her to take care of everything. She thought about the bills piling up on her kitchen table, about the choice between groceries and medicine that she faced every month. When she opened her eyes, the host was still smiling, confident in his victory. He had no idea what he was about to unleash. He thought he was humiliating a simple waitress, forcing her to embarrass herself for his amusement. Maya took a deep breath and walked toward the piano, her legs feeling like lead. The room fell silent, except for the soft click of her footsteps on the hardwood floor. Every eye followed her movement, every ear waited for the first fumbling notes that would justify their laughter. She reached the piano bench and sat down slowly, her hands trembling as they hovered over the keys. This wasn't how she had imagined returning to music, not as a spectacle for cruel strangers. But maybe, just maybe, she could turn their game against them. The host raised his glass in a mock toast. "Ladies and gentlemen, our evening's entertainment." Maya's hands rested on the piano keys, and for the first time in hours, the room was completely silent. She could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of 20 pairs of eyes watching her every move. The guests leaned forward in their chairs, phones already out, ready to record what they expected would be an embarrassing moment they could share later. The host stood behind her, still holding his champagne glass, his smile wide with anticipation. "Take your time," he said mockingly. "We're all very patient." Maya closed her eyes and tried to block out their presence. She thought about her brother, about the promise she had made to herself to survive whatever life threw at her. But she also thought about the girl she used to be, the one who lived and breathed music, who spent hours at the piano creating magic with her fingertips. A memory surfaced from years ago. She was 12 years old, sitting at her family's old upright piano, struggling with a particularly difficult piece. Her mother sat beside her, patient and encouraging. "Music isn't about showing off," her mother had said softly. "It's about sharing your heart. When you play with truth, people will always listen." Maya opened her eyes and looked down at the keys. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished black surface. She saw the scared waitress, but underneath, she also saw the musician who had never really died, just been buried under years of survival. "Well?" the host prompted, his patience wearing thin. "Are we going to hear something tonight or not?" Instead of answering, Maya placed her fingers on the keys. But instead of the simple tune everyone expected, she began with something that made the entire room freeze. The opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor filled the air, complex and haunting and absolutely perfect. The transformation was immediate. The mocking smiles disappeared from the guests' faces as if someone had flipped a switch. The host's champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. Even the waitstaff who had gathered near the doorway stood perfectly still. Maya's fingers moved across the keys with a skill that spoke of years of serious training. This wasn't someone who had learned a few songs from YouTube videos. This was a classically trained pianist performing one of the most technically demanding pieces in the repertoire. The music filled every corner of the room, reaching into places that money couldn't buy and status couldn't touch. It was raw emotion translated into sound. Years of pain and hope and dreams deferred, all flowing through her fingertips. Maya had forgotten how good it felt to play, how the music could carry her away from everything else. The guests sat in stunned silence. The woman with the diamond necklace had tears in her eyes. The older man who had joked about dinner theater was staring at Maya with his mouth slightly open. They had expected to laugh at a struggling waitress. Instead, they were witnessing something extraordinary. Maya's body swayed slightly as she played, lost in the music she had missed so desperately. Her technique was flawless, but more than that, her interpretation was deeply personal. Every note carried weight, every phrase told a story. This wasn't just playing. This was pure artistry. The host had gone completely pale. He realized, perhaps for the first time in his life, that he had drastically underestimated someone. The young woman he had dismissed as insignificant was revealing herself to be remarkably talented. His cruel game had backfired spectacularly. Maya moved into the more complex sections of the piece. Her confidence grew. Her fingers flew across the keys in passages that would challenge even professional pianists. The technical difficulty was obvious to anyone who knew classical music, but even those who didn't could hear the skill and passion in every measure. A businessman near the back of the room recognized the piece and whispered to his wife, "That's Chopin's first ballade. I heard it at Carnegie Hall last year. She's playing it perfectly." The whisper spread through the room like wildfire. People began to realize they weren't just hearing good playing, they were experiencing something special. Several guests pulled out their phones again, but this time it wasn't to mock. They wanted to capture this unexpected moment of beauty. Maya was completely absorbed in the music now. She had forgotten about the cruel host, about the mocking guests, about everything except the conversation between her heart and the piano. This was who she really was, stripped of all the roles and masks she had worn for survival. The piece built to its dramatic climax, Maya's hands moving with incredible speed and precision. The sound filled the room like a thunderstorm, powerful and overwhelming. Some of the guests had never heard live classical music this close, and the intensity was almost shocking. Then, just as suddenly as the storm had come, it began to calm. Maya guided the music through its final sections with incredible sensitivity, each note placed with perfect timing and expression. The ending approached, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The final notes hung in the air like a prayer, beautiful and fragile, and absolutely perfect. Maya's hands lifted from the keys, and for a long moment nobody moved. The silence was complete, but it was no longer the cruel anticipation of earlier. This was the silence of awe. Then someone started clapping. It was the older businessman, the one who had recognized the piece. His applause was slow and respectful, the kind reserved for serious performances. Others joined in, and soon the entire room was applauding. But it wasn't the polite clapping of a dinner party. This was genuine appreciation. Maya turned around on the piano bench, and for the first time that evening, she looked directly at her audience. The faces staring back at her were completely different from before. The mockery was gone, replaced by respect and amazement. Even the host looked shaken. "That was," one woman started to say, then stopped, unable to find the right words. "Incredible," another guest finished for her. Maya stood up slowly, her legs still shaky from the emotional intensity of the performance. She had revealed more of herself in those few minutes than she had to anyone in years. It felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. The host cleared his throat, clearly struggling to regain control of the situation. His plan to humiliate Maya had not only failed, but had completely reversed on him. Now he was the one who looked foolish, the one who had misjudged the situation so badly. That was... He stammered, then stopped. For once in his life, he seemed at a loss for words. An elegant woman in her 60s stood up from her table. Maya noticed her for the first time, recognizing something different about her presence. While the others had been laughing earlier, this woman had remained quiet, observing everything with intelligent eyes. "Young lady," the woman said, her voice carrying natural authority. "Where did you study?" Maya hesitated. She hadn't talked about her musical background with anyone in years. It was too painful, too much of a reminder of everything she had lost. I studied at the conservatory," she said quietly. Before, she couldn't finish the sentence, but the woman seemed to understand. There was recognition in her eyes, the look of someone who understood what sacrifice looked like. The room was still buzzing with amazement. Guests were talking quietly among themselves. Their entire perception of the evening completely changed. What had started as a cruel joke had become something none of them would ever forget. Maya realized that something fundamental had shifted. She had been forced into the spotlight, but instead of being destroyed by it, she had reclaimed a piece of herself she thought was lost forever. The music had reminded her who she really was underneath all the struggles and compromises. But she also knew that the hardest part was yet to come. Now that her secret was out, everything was about to change. The elegant woman who had asked about Maya's education stepped closer, her sharp eyes studying the young pianist with genuine interest. Unlike the other guests who seemed shocked by what they had witnessed, this woman appeared to be processing the performance on a deeper level. "Forgive me," the woman said gently, "but I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Catherine Montgomery and I sit on the board of the Metropolitan Conservatory." Maya felt her heart skip a beat. The Metropolitan Conservatory was one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. She had dreamed of auditioning there once back when such dreams seemed possible. "I'm Maya," she replied softly, suddenly very aware that she was still wearing her waitress uniform while standing in a room full of people who now knew her secret. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "Maya, that was an extraordinary performance. Chopin's First Ballade is not a piece that can be faked or stumbled through. You have serious classical training." The host, who had been unusually quiet since the performance ended, finally found his voice. "Wait a minute," he said, his tone suspicious. "You're telling me our waitress is some kind of professional musician?" Maya shook her head quickly. "No, I'm not professional, I used to study music. A long time ago." But Catherine wasn't satisfied with that answer. She had spent decades in the music world, and she could recognize exceptional talent when she saw it. "How long ago?" she asked kindly. Maya looked around the room, feeling trapped again, but in a completely different way. These people were no longer mocking her, but their attention felt just as overwhelming. "I was accepted to Juilliard when I was 18, she said quietly. "Full scholarship." The room erupted in whispers. Juilliard was a name everyone recognized, even those who knew nothing about classical music. Getting accepted there was like winning a lottery that only the most talented could even enter. "Juilliard," the host repeated, his voice cracking slightly. "And you're working as a waitress?" Maya felt heat rise to her cheeks. The shame she had carried for years was now exposed in front of strangers. "Things change," she said simply. "But," Catherine pressed gently. "What happened? Why didn't you go?" Maya closed her eyes for a moment, fighting back the emotions that always came with this story. "My parents died in a car accident right before I was supposed to start. My younger brother was badly injured. He needed surgery, physical therapy, ongoing care. Someone had to take care of him." The room fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. The cruelty and mockery had been replaced by something Maya hadn't expected: sympathy. "So you gave up your scholarship to take care of your brother?" Catherine said softly. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. She had never said it out loud like that, had never admitted to anyone what she had sacrificed. Hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that hurt. "How old were you?" asked the woman with the diamond necklace, her earlier amusement completely gone. 18, Maya replied. "My brother was only 14. The businessman who had recognized the Chopin piece shook his head in amazement. "You've been taking care of him for 6 years?" 7, Maya corrected. "He's doing better now, but the medical bills." She trailed off, not wanting to burden these strangers with the details of her financial struggles. Catherine's expression had grown increasingly thoughtful as Maya spoke. "And you've been keeping up your playing all this time?" Maya almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "When I can, I have an old keyboard in my apartment. I practice late at night when I get home from work, when the neighbors won't complain about the noise." "On a keyboard," Catherine repeated, her voice filled with something close to wonder. "It's not the same as a real piano," Maya admitted. "Tonight was the first time I've played on a grand piano in years." The host had been growing more uncomfortable as the conversation continued. His cruel game had revealed not just Maya's talent but also her story of sacrifice and dedication. He was beginning to realize how badly he had misjudged the situation. "Look," he said, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. "Maybe we should all just get back to the party. I'm sure Maya needs to get back to work." But Catherine held up her hand. Actually, I'd like to hear more about your situation, Maya. Do you mind if we talk privately for a few minutes? Maya glanced nervously at her supervisor, who had been watching from the doorway. The woman nodded, indicating that it was okay to step away from serving duties. Catherine led Maya to a quiet corner of the room, away from the other guests who were still buzzing with conversation about what they had witnessed. Maya, Catherine began, I want you to know that what you just did was remarkable. Not just the playing, though that was exceptional, but the courage it took to perform under those circumstances to reveal yourself like that. Maya felt tears threatening to form. I didn't have much choice. Oh, but you did, Catherine said firmly. You could have played something simple. Something safe. You could have given them what they expected. Instead, you showed them exactly who you are. I don't know why I did that, Maya admitted. I guess I was angry. Catherine smiled. Good. Anger can be fuel for art. The best performers I know have fire in them. She pulled out her phone and showed Maya a photo. This is my granddaughter. She's about your age and she just finished her master's degree at the conservatory. She's talented, but she's never had to fight for anything. She's never had to choose between her dreams and her family. Maya looked at the photo of a young woman in a graduation gown, holding a violin and smiling brightly. I'm telling you this, Catherine continued, because I want you to understand something. Talent is common. Real talent is less common, but it still exists in abundance. What you have is much rarer. What do you mean? You have talent that has been tested by fire. You've kept your skills alive under impossible circumstances. You've sacrificed everything for someone you love, and you're still here, still playing, still creating beauty in the world. Maya felt overwhelmed by the older woman's words. But I'm not a professional anymore. I work in a restaurant. I haven't performed in years. Performance is just one part of being a musician, Catherine said. You've been living music every day even if no one else could see it. That's what real musicianship looks like. She paused, studying Maya's face carefully. Tell me about your brother. How is he doing now? Better, Maya said, a small smile crossing her face for the first time that evening. He's in college now, studying engineering. He still needs some medical care, but nothing like before. And you're still supporting him? Maya nodded. I promised him I would see him through school. He's smart, much smarter than me. He deserves every opportunity. Catherine was quiet for a long moment, then she said something that made Maya's world stop spinning. What if I told you there was a way to help your brother and return to music at the same time? Maya's heart began to race. What do you mean? I mean, Catherine said slowly, that there are people in this world who believe in investing in exceptional talent, especially when that talent comes with character. I mean that your story doesn't have to end here. She looked back toward the piano where the host was still standing awkwardly, clearly unsure how to proceed with his party after everything that had happened. Maya, Catherine continued, I think tonight was supposed to happen. Not the cruelty, not the attempt to humiliate you, but the revelation. The moment when you stopped hiding who you really are. Maya felt hope rising in her chest, a feeling she had almost forgotten existed. What are you saying? Catherine smiled, and in that smile, Maya saw the possibility of a future she had thought was lost forever. I'm saying that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another. 3 weeks had passed since that unforgettable evening at the Golden Terrace, and Maya still couldn't believe how much her life had changed. She stood in the hospital corridor, holding a bouquet of flowers and watching her brother Alex through the window of his physical therapy session. He was walking across parallel bars without assistance, something that would have been impossible just months ago. You're early today, said Dr. Peterson, approaching with a warm smile. Alex has been making incredible progress since we started the new treatment program. Maya nodded, still amazed by what was happening. After Catherine had made some phone calls, Alex had been accepted into a specialized medical program that covered all his remaining treatments. The relief Maya felt was indescribable. For the first time in 7 years, she didn't have to choose between her brother's health and everything else. The foundation that's sponsoring his care, Dr. Peterson continued. They must really believe in you both. This level of support is extraordinary. Maya smiled, thinking about Catherine and the events that had led to this moment. After that night at the restaurant, Catherine had moved with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades making things happen in the music world. Within days, she had arranged for Alex's medical care and presented Maya with an opportunity. That seemed too good to be true. Her phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Ready for today? Remember, just be yourself. Today was the day Maya had been both anticipating and dreading. Catherine had arranged for her to audition for a special program at the Metropolitan Conservatory, one designed for talented musicians who had been forced to interrupt their studies. It wasn't just about the music, it was about getting a second chance at the dreams she had put aside. Alex finished his session and came out to the waiting area, moving with more confidence than Maya had seen in years. Ready to go? He asked, grabbing his jacket. You know you don't have to come with me, Maya said for the 10th time that morning. I know you have studying to do. Alex grinned. Are you kidding? My sister is auditioning for one of the best music schools in the country. I wouldn't miss this for anything. They took the subway downtown to the conservatory, a beautiful old building that Maya had only seen in pictures before. Standing in front of it, she felt a mixture of excitement and terror. This place represented everything she had wanted 7 years ago, everything she had thought was lost forever. Catherine was waiting for them in the lobby, along with 2 other people Maya didn't recognize. Maya, Alex, I'm so glad you're here, Catherine said warmly. I'd like you to meet Professor Williams, who heads our piano department, and Diana Chen, who runs our special programs division. Professor Williams was a distinguished man in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Diana was younger, probably in her 40s, with an energy that reminded Maya of Catherine. We've heard so much about you, Diana said, shaking Maya's hand. Catherine shared the video from that evening, and we're all very excited to hear you play. Maya's cheeks flushed. She had forgotten that several guests had recorded her performance on their phones. I hope I can live up to the expectations, she said nervously. Professor Williams smiled. The beauty of music is that it speaks for itself. We're not here to judge you. We're here to listen. They walked through hallways lined with practice rooms, the sound of various instruments creating a symphony of dedication and learning. Maya felt like she was walking through a dream. Students her age and younger moved between classes, carrying instrument cases and sheet music, living the life she had once imagined for herself. The audition room was smaller than Maya had expected, containing just a grand piano and a few chairs. The afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, creating patterns on the wooden floor. Take your time, Professor Williams said as Maya sat at the piano bench. Play whatever feels right to you. Maya placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for a moment. She thought about the night at the restaurant, about the cruel laughter that had turned to stunned silence. But she also thought about Alex, about the sacrifices that had led her here, about the music that had sustained her through the darkest times. She began with the same Chopin piece that had changed everything, but this time it felt different. There was no anger or defiance in her playing, just pure expression. The notes flowed from her fingers like water, each phrase shaped by years of longing and hope deferred. When she finished, the room was quiet except for the distant sounds of the conservatory around them. Professor Williams was nodding slowly, his expression thoughtful. Beautiful, he said simply. Now I'd like to hear something different, something that shows us who you are as a musician today. Maya thought for a moment, then began to play a piece she had been working on at home, a modern composition that spoke to her current life. It was complex and emotional, blending classical technique with contemporary harmonies. As she played, she felt herself telling the story of the last 7 years through music. Diana was taking notes, but Maya could see she was also simply listening, caught up in the emotion of the performance. When Maya finished, the silence stretched for several seconds. Maya, Professor Williams said finally, I have to ask you something. How have you maintained this level of skill while working full-time and caring for your brother? Maya thought about all those late nights at her keyboard, the hours stolen from sleep to keep her fingers moving, the way music had been her escape when everything else felt overwhelming. "I never stopped playing," she said. "Even when I couldn't afford lessons or didn't have time for proper practice, I found ways to keep music alive. It was the only thing that kept me sane." Catherine leaned forward. "What Maya isn't telling you is that she's been teaching herself new pieces for years, learning from recordings and online videos, pushing herself to grow even without formal instruction." "That's remarkable," Diana said. "Most students at your level require constant guidance to maintain their skills, let alone improve them." Alex spoke up from where he had been sitting quietly. "She plays every night when she gets home from work. Sometimes I fall asleep listening to her practice. It's the most beautiful sound in the world." Maya felt tears threatening to form. Her brother's faith in her had never wavered, even when her own had. Professor Williams exchanged glances with Diana and Catherine. "Maya, we'd like to offer you a place in our accelerated program. It's designed for students with exceptional talent who have had interrupted educations. You would complete your degree in 3 years instead of 4, with full financial support." Maya's heart stopped. What? "Furthermore," Diana added, "we have a work-study position available. You would teach beginner piano lessons to children in our community outreach program. It pays well, and the schedule is flexible enough to allow for your studies." Maya looked at Alex, who was grinning so widely she thought his face might split in half. Then she looked at Catherine, who was smiling with the satisfaction of someone who had just orchestrated a beautiful piece of music. "I don't know what to say," Maya whispered. "Say yes," Alex urged. "Say yes to all of it." 6 months later, Maya stood on the stage of the conservatory's recital hall, preparing for her first public performance as a student. In the audience, she could see Alex in the front row, healthy and strong, studying engineering just as he had always dreamed. Next to him sat Catherine, beaming with pride. But perhaps most surprising of all was the figure sitting a few rows back. The tech billionaire who had tried to humiliate her that night was there, looking genuinely interested in hearing her play. After everything that had happened, he had reached out to apologize and ask if he could support her education. It turned out that being publicly embarrassed had led to some serious self-reflection. As Maya began to play, she thought about how strange life could be. The worst night of her professional life had become the beginning of everything she had ever wanted. The cruel joke that was meant to break her spirit had instead revealed her strength. The music filled the hall, carrying with it all the dreams deferred, all the love for family, all the hope that had kept her going through the darkest times. And for the first time in 7 years, Maya wasn't just surviving, she was truly living.